సూపర్ పవర్గా ఎదిగేందుకు భారత్కు అన్ని అవకాశాలున్నాయని ప్రఖ్యాత అంతర్జాతీయ నిపుణుడు డాక్టర్ ఆస్లే టెలిస్ అన్నారు. ఆర్థికంగా స్థిర అభివృద్ధి సాధించిన ఆర్థిక సామర్థ్యాన్ని పొరుగు దేశాలకు పంచి వాటితో సంబంధాలను బలోపేతం చేసుకోవడం, మానవ వనరులను విస్తృతంగా ఉపయోగించుకోవడం తదితర చర్యల వల్ల భారత్ సూపర్ పవర్గా ఎదుగుతుందని ఆస్లే వెల్లడించారు. డాక్టర్ ఆస్లే కార్నెగీ ఎండోమెంట్లో సీనియర్ అసోసియేట్గా పనిచేస్తున్నారు. అంతర్జాతీయ భద్రతా రంగంలో ఆయనకు అపార అనుభవం ఉంది. రక్షణ, ఆసియా ప్రాంత వ్యూహాత్మక సంబంధాల విశ్లేషణలో ఆరితేరిన వ్యక్తి. అమెరికా, భారత భద్రతా వ్యవహారాలకు సంబంధించి అమెరికా ప్రభుత్వంలో సలహాదారునిగా పనిచేశారు. ప్రస్తుతం ప్రపంచ దేశాల్లో భారత్ వేగంగా గుర్తింపు పొందుతోంది. దేశాన్ని సూపర్ పవర్గా తీర్చిదిద్దేందుకు ప్రధాని మోదీ అన్ని రకాలుగా ప్రయత్నాలు చేస్తున్నారు. మరి ఈ ప్రయత్నాలు సరైన దారిలోనే వెళ్తున్నాయా? అమెరికా సహా ఇతర దేశాలతో భారత సంబంధాలు ఎలా ఉన్నాయి? శక్తివంతమైన దేశంగా ఆవిర్భవించేందుకు తీసుకోవాల్సిన చర్యలేంటి? ఇలాంటి ప్రశ్నలకు సమాధానాలు తెలుసుకోవడానికి మా ప్రతినిధి హరి ప్రయత్నించారు. డాక్టర్ ఆస్లేతో హరి ఫేస్ టు ఫేస్ ఇప్పుడు చూద్దాం.
Hi, welcome to Sakshi. We have Dr. Ashley J. Tellis, expert on international security, defense and Asian strategic issues. Senior Associate at Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, specializing international security, defense and Asian strategic issues, and he served State Department, United States and National Security Council. We are fortunate to have him today. He is pretty well known through his seminars and well known as a rock star, presenter, scholar, diplomat, big thinker and a policymaker, and is one of the architects in negotiating the India-US nuclear deal. Great to have you here, sir.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Now, first of all, talking about India, that over like 2 decades, there is a speculation. I don't call it as a speculation, but it has gained the attention in the world stage. India is an emerging superpower. Do you agree with that?
Yes and no. I think India's future is one of being a superpower. But India has to do some very difficult things. Our route to getting there. Now the good news is that it has begun that process. And that process has been underway since at least 1991, if not earlier.
The reformers when
The entire reform program that was unleashed by Prime Minister Narasimha Rao and Finance Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh.
Yeah.
Right up to the transformations that are taking place under Prime Minister Modi today. This is a work in progress. But the future is very clear. India will be one of the leading powers of the international system and will be one of the key players in Asia. So that is something that we are all looking forward to.
So what kind of efforts do India need to put to achieve that?
I think there are 2 or 3 broad areas that India needs to be successful at. The first and most important is to sustain high growth for an extended period of time. If you look at the historical record, most great powers really needed to grow for long periods of time before they became recognized and significant in the international community.
I would like to recall the quote that you mentioned in some seminar that what Kautilya said. If you need to reach someone that who is enemy or someone that you need to go beyond that who lies there.
Yes.
Right?
Well, the famous Kautilyan line was, "The enemy of my enemy is my friend."
Friend.
Correct.
So you see the efforts what India is making to be friendly, to move along with the neighbors. How do you see that efforts? Because I'm asking you that being a third eye, you can judge better that how are we progressing towards that?
See, India lives in a very difficult neighborhood, right? India is a democracy. It's a very large state. It is surrounded by many smaller states with tremendous insecurities and also very big developmental challenges. So it's not as if it's a neighborhood that's easy to manage. So the 2 things that India needs to do is to first grow its own economy and gradually open that economy up entirely to its neighbors. Now it's already done that in substantial ways, because as India grows, the neighborhood can grow with it. So that's very important.
So we need to make that in a floating tide.
Absolutely. It's the tide that raises all boats, right? As they say. But the second part is that India needs to engage with its neighbors in helping them deal with their own internal challenges, and also to engage neighbors that are difficult. And Pakistan is a classic example of a country that has real difficulties with India.
Right. As a superpower in the world, that America, the US, how tenacious is US to cope up with the friends like India to create that kind of environment where they develop themselves and help to contribute to the world in international platform?
See, the United States is going to be a great power for a long time to come because it has some very unique capabilities that are present in very few countries. But what the United States has done in the last 20 odd years is to reach out to India in a very special way because India's growing strength is viewed more and more in the United States as an asset. And so the US and presidents now from both parties, we had President Clinton, a Democrat, followed by President Bush, a Republican, and now President Obama, a Democrat, who have followed that same policy consistently, which is we want to build a friendship with India because we have common democratic values. We want to build a friendship with India because we have convergent interests. And we want to build India's power because India's growing power actually strengthens the liberal order worldwide.
In this context, are you happy with the progress what India is taking?
I wish some things were done faster. I wish the reforms that began in 91 had begun much earlier. I think the reforms that have continued after 1991 were accelerated. Prime Minister Modi, I think, is beginning to recognize that he cannot afford to go slow. Primarily because India is a young country. There are millions of young people who need jobs, who need incomes, who are a very aspirational lot. And you cannot meet those aspirations unless there is real success.
So can we bank on that resources, what just you mentioned now, the people, for example?
I think that is India's greatest resource. That is India's greatest resource. And to my mind, if India manages to sustain its steady path towards great power status, it will not be because it has natural resources. It will not be because it has other assets. Its people are what will drive its growth.
Did you notice the enormous change in this aspect that, where the people, not very long back ago, the people, they did not have this social status, so-called social status. Now they are in the position where they can determine the future of the people, not only Indian, but, across the world.
This is a remarkable transformation. When the fathers of Indian democracy created the Constitution between 1947 and 1950, I don't think they had the faintest imagination about how revolutionary this document was going to be. Because what this document did was it upended the entire social order that has existed in India for centuries. For centuries, you had a hierarchical social order where there were large segments of India's population that really had no political standing. Today, it is possible simply by virtue of being an Indian citizen that you not only have political rights, but that you can aspire to the highest office of the land. I mean, we've had, India's presidents, come from the depressed sections of society. We have among business leaders, among social leaders, people from all strata. This is a remarkable example.
So how far are we, or how close are we to achieve that nationalist project?
I think there have been great achievements, but it is not complete. And to my mind, it won't be complete until the massive development problems that still characterize the Indian economy are resolved. Because at the end of the day, right, political rights must ultimately translate into the empowerment of people. And a very important dimension of empowerment is to be able to live as human with some material dignity, right? You can't expect people who are abjectly poor, to claim that they have realized their full potential. They have not. And so a huge portion of the Indian nationalist project must be to elevate the bottom 1/3 of Indian society and bring them into the Indian market and bring them into Indian politics.
So what do you think to lessen that, whatever the gap between these two sections of people, what you just said, that poor and, a rich class?
Yes.
Okay, and the private, some segment of the people who captures the power and the money, and for their private benefit. The question is whether it can lead to the development of the country. That what kind of policy that we should inhabit?
Well, let us separate the two issues. The first issue is how do you bring people who are abjectly poor into the market,
Okay.
and how do you make them individuals capable of realizing their own potential? The only institution that we know that does this better than all others is the marketplace. And so the market reforms that India has begun in 1991 must be accelerated, and they must be expanded.
Okay.
Which
Where do you
means,
see that India is lag behind in this market?
well, India has still got very large portions of the economy that are under state control. I do not believe that serves India's interests well over the long term.
Okay.
A certain measure of state control in the strategic dimensions of the economy, like defense, is completely understandable.
Yeah.
But in other areas of the economy, there is absolutely no reason why the state should be deeply involved in economic activity.
Do you see the developments of late that foreign investments coming in and the ratio has been increased now? It's no more like that's something which is not acceptable. It is like 51-49, the percentage I'm talking about. Is it something that we are going towards that what we are really have to?
The direction is absolutely correct.
Yeah.
The direction of reducing the state's involvement in the economy is a good direction. The direction of inviting foreign capital, foreign talent, foreign technology into the country is absolutely the right direction. So the challenge here is to stay the course, to consistently keep at this until you can raise India's growth rates to high single digit, 8 or 9%, or better still, if you can go to double digits. And it's not enough to simply achieve that, it's equally important to sustain it. The great example that China demonstrates is that China transformed itself because it was able to maintain high growth rates from 1978 onwards until a few years ago. Now you're talking of close to something that is 30 to 40 years, right? It is that kind of sustained performance that if India can establish will be transformative for Indian economy and for Indian democracy.
I'll ask you something important now, that how important is it for United States to make India, to make pause for Chinese development and grow on its own?
I think the two are linked. The United States cares about India for its own sake, because even if China didn't exist, we would want to have a good relationship with India because we have a common democratic inheritance. We are liberal societies in common, and we are completely multinational societies. We are many nations all wrapped into one. So there are enormous commonalities of ambition, of aspiration that we have for ourselves as peoples. So even if China didn't exist, there would be great incentives for the United States to maintain a deep relationship with India.
So that as you served in the National Security Council too, that how do you see that security part, working along with India when it comes to using the sophisticated technology and helping India to even in the production of that that important things. So how do you see that aspect?
We have made remarkable progress in the last 20 years. When I served at the US Embassy in Delhi in 2001, our US-India defense trade ran into a few tens of millions of dollars. That's it. There was really no defense trade worth the name. Today, my understanding is that our defense trade is roughly of the order of about $13 to $15 billion. So we've made quantum leaps in our capacity to work with each other and treat each other as partners. India still has tremendous security challenges. There are insurgencies on the Indian periphery, some of which are supported by India's neighbors. There is rising Chinese military power, which is taking place in India's northeast. These are solutions, the solutions to these problems will be long, difficult and expensive. And the US is willing to help, but to be 90% of the work will have to be done in India.
Okay.
90% of the work will have to be done by India. India's friends can at best be a supplement to its own efforts.
Right. Adding to that many countries or some countries, they are still skeptical about that, America thoughts about this giving, that helping that, other nations when it comes to the security. What do you talk about? What do you say?
I can understand why they would be skeptical. And in many ways, the United States will have to prove itself. So you have to ask that question of, Indian policymakers. Are they satisfied with the progress that we have made since, say, 1998? Are they optimistic about the relationship with the United States? Do they see the relationship with the United States as an opportunity or as a threat?
Really overwhelming to have you here, and you shared very important and very exciting things about that India being a superpower, and it is very happy to know that we are on the way and we are there.
Good.
It won't take longer.
I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much for being here.
Pleasure. Thank you.